Welcome back to The Dive. Today's guest will deep dive into the cannabis sector, from the state of its legalization, retail investors, and the United Kingdom embracing the cannabis sector. She will also discuss the company's latest exchange-traded fund and its investment in nicotine replacement treatment. She is the co-founder and managing partner of Poseidon Asset Management. Emily Paxhia is joining us today. But first, consider subscribing to our channel by hitting that red subscribe button below. Hey, Emily, welcome back to The Dive.
Hi, thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming back on again. All right, so let's start with the current state of legalization in the US. Do you think we're seeing any real progress since Biden was elected?
No, I think that this market had really put a lot behind what they were calling the blue wave when we saw Biden get elected in November, and then things changed over in Georgia after the new year. And, I think that it's kind of like hanging your tile on a house that's falling down in the sense that the Biden administration has proven to be at best tepid towards the cannabis industry. Obviously he and Harris had run on saying that they were going to focus on decriminalization and getting people out of prison. We've seen zero movement on that. And in fact, we're seeing more headwinds than ever in some ways on the federal level, including the fact that Schumer and Booker have now held the SAFE Act hostage in terms of providing banking reform. So the short answer on Biden is no. The longer answer is actually, I feel like we're a little bit sliding back in terms of progress, because if you don't keep the pendulum moving in the direction, it just comes back further. So I don't think this is a case where we're going to be putting the genie back in the bottle, because there is far too much support and interest behind this industry. In one sense, I'm glad, because it's catalyzed interest from the GOP. So this issue is clearly no longer a partisan issue where it's sitting in the Democrats' hands. In fact, the GOP has kind of taken this up and run with it when you see someone like Mace putting forward language around actually a very pragmatic approach to legalization. So, what I would say to the markets, though, and the investors who are watching this, is that it's important to remember that Poseidon has been investing since January 2014 into this industry actively. In that time, we have seen companies go from $0 to billions of dollars. And all of this has happened without banking reform, without legalization at the federal level. And they're just taking it state by state. So a tremendous growth and strong business fundamentals are possible outside of progress at the federal level. So I would hope that, I know everyone was excited to see these things happen, but if they don't, it's for us just business as usual. And by the way, fantastic business as usual.
Awesome. Okay, so do you think any of the current bills have a shot of being passed through?
I think they have a shot of being passed through. I don't think they have a shot of being passed through very soon. And we'll see. You just never know what could happen at the 11th hour in these rooms with these politicians. But I don't think we see SAFE. I don't think we're going to see any legalization. I don't care about legalization. I just want people out of prison. I want people to stop going to prison for nonviolent cannabis possession and retailing offenses. So it's just really, it's something that's just over. We have to stop with it. This industry is real. If you look at the US alone, there's a $91 billion economic impact to having a legal and regulated market that we have today. That's through job creation. That's through all of the derivative reach of this industry into the US. And it's just extraordinary when you think about it. So, I think we won't be seeing things pass soon. And unfortunately, we're going into midterms, so it's going to get, heavily political, as if it's not already today. But it's, like I said, it's just business as usual for the industry, and we just keep watching what happens state to state, and we keep going from there.
Mm-hmm. And there's clearly a bit of a buyer's strike amongst cannabis retail investors, given the current climate of cannabis reform. Do you think some of the companies that need to keep raising money are going to find themselves in some sort of trouble soon if there isn't some sort of major reform?
I think that I think the lack of reform impacts the smaller businesses. I think the top tier operators with the resources that they already have today will continue to be able to execute on their businesses without issue. They have access to a lot of debt. There are many institutional investors, and you've seen it. You've seen hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars raised into these companies on the side of debt. Now it's unusual to see the debt kind of leading so far in front of the equity markets, but at some point this will catch up. So as long as they can continue to have access to that financing, we think it could go on. And there are multiple REITs now focused on the industry. Obviously there's IIPR, but there's also multiple private ones and now some public ones. So I do think there will be still access to capital, but I think it's going to create a greater disparity between the big operators and the small operators, which is the opposite of what the Democrats are thinking that they're achieving by holding these bills back and these different opportunities back. So they're just creating greater disparity of access to building these businesses by doing this. So I unfortunately think it will make it harder for the smaller operators to continue to grow, but the bigger ones will continue to do what they do best. And in fact, I mean, looking at their businesses, they could start to, look at using cash flow to continue to grow. So yeah, I think they'll do okay. Not only do I think they'll do okay, I think they're going to do fantastically, but that's me.
So the UK has recently made some progressive steps to embrace the cannabis sector, with a string of medical cannabis companies listing on the London Stock Exchange. And a report by Drug Policy Reform says that the UK alone is missing a potential £1.2 billion in the medical cannabis industry. How close are you monitoring other markets?
Yeah, so Poseidon has been a global investor basically since we started. Our first entry point obviously was into Canada. It had a legal medical market. So we do track what goes on in the broader global markets and seeing what opportunities make sense. We do track, specifically, we've got exposure in Colombia, Mexico, and Western Europe, including the UK. Our first investment actually was in GW Pharmaceutical, which is a UK-based company originally. So now acquired by Jazz. But we watch these things, we carefully assess and watch market size. Mike Bonello, from one of our managing directors, and I traveled to the UK last year, or 2 years ago. I was in Portugal 2 years ago. We're definitely tracking what's going on in these markets, but we're mindful of market size, and we're also mindful of the fragmentation of these markets. One of the things that I saw when we were in the UK and Western Europe is that there wasn't even really naming convention about, do we call this medical marijuana? Do we call this cannabis? Like, it just reminded me of very early days in the US and Canada. And so we're just mindful of the opportunity space and lean in where we think the potential growth is greatest. But we do track it very closely. We keep our eyes on basically everything. This is all we do.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess you have to. All right. So per our research, you're one of the firms behind Respira. They recently announced its application to the FDA as a prescribed nicotine replacement therapy. What can you tell us about this? And from your perspective, how does this differ from e-cigs or other mainstream vapes?
Yep. Respira is very exciting, and it's been kind of operating in stealth mode for like 2 years, which is, so we haven't been talking about it as much as other portfolio companies, but they just had a very successful, you just pointed that out. It was very successful for them. It's a great step. And one of the things we liked about it is that we've seen what's happened on the e-cig side. We've seen what happened during the vape hysteria of 2019. And Respira is really kind of an answer to that with their technology, where it doesn't involve combusting or heating to the point where it changes the properties of the active ingredient, whatever it may be. It could be pharmaceutical, it could be tobacco, it could be cannabis. But they're very mindful on thinking about it from a harm reduction standpoint and having an opportunity for people to engage in a way that is not additionally harmful. At Poseidon, I think we have a ethos of being very let people do what they want to do. Like, you're holding people back. Prohibition of things has never worked, and we're seeing it in real time in every form and fashion, and how different things kind of seek into the ecosystem, like what's going on with fentanyl right now and opioids, and just the rampant abuse of that by the cartels as part of an active illicit market. But Respira allows people to engage in things that they'd like to, but do so in a safer way and true harm reduction fashion, and using true proprietary technology with real IP around it. And one of the things we love about it is a great team. You have the founder, who is the innovator and really the engineer behind it. And then you have his partner, so that's Mario. And then you have his partner, Brian, who came in from 25 years of experience plus in the smokeless tobacco division at Altria. So has obviously seen what's gone on that space, has watched, with great attention how the entire e-cig space move forward. And this group, I think one of the things we saw with the e-cig space, which is why it kind of has backfired in many ways, and the same thing with vaping in general, is that it was kind of a move fast and break things approach because the regulators couldn't keep up with the growth of it. But I think Respira is taking a very mindful approach where they're taking all of these steps by going right in with the FDA and really leaning in on it, because they do really believe as a company in harm reduction and thinking about ways for people to be able to absorb different compounds, products, like I said, all the way from pharmaceutical through to cannabis and tobacco. And I mean, even from a wellness standpoint, you could look at it from a vitamin standpoint, but it's pretty exciting to see it. And so it's not just harm reduction, but I would say it's also like wellness focused.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about Poseidon. The company launched the Advisor Shares Poseidon Dynamic Cannabis ETF, which began trading last November 17th. What can you tell us about the ETF, and how will the fund identify companies strategically positioned from the cannabis industry?
Yeah, so we are so excited to have launched this ETF. It's actually an interesting story. So for those who don't know, I co-founded the company with my brother back in 2013. We started trading in our first fund in January of 2014. And Morgan and I always do kind of a state of the union at the end of the year. And that's my brother's name, Morgan, and I always do this. And we also have been doing some goal tracking over the years. In 2017, Morgan put into his goal tracker that he wanted to launch an ETF. And then fast forward to, we kind of had built a relationship with Advisor Shares, got to know Noah and Dan. And then we had Tyler, our new managing director, who joined us on the ETF, who had been working with us in a CFO capacity, kind of joined the team. We started talking about it, and we were very excited to launch this to the market in November of this year. And so what is exciting for us too is that Poseidon has traditionally managed private funds, which has a limitation in terms of the investor base we can reach out to and the ways we can go about it. The ETF allows us to democratize access to our platform in terms of investing into the cannabis industry. And so we're really excited that we can have this. It's New York Stock Exchange traded, so it's accessible via the Robinhood platforms, TD Ameritrade, Schwab. And so people like you and me can just go buy the Poseidon ETF, which has not always been the case with our other private funds. And it's very exciting. We feel like with 8 years of investing experience in cannabis, that's a extraordinarily long tenure of investing in cannabis, and our exposure on the markets, our understanding of the markets, our understanding of the underlying companies and the fundamentals of the companies in the market, we think gives us a really interesting perspective and point of view. And, we call it the dynamic ETF because we've always believed that in investing in cannabis, you have to be very nimble and dynamic to kind of navigate an emerging market, because it moves in many different ways, and you have to be able to calibrate, recalibrate, and understand what the ways to optimize growth are. And so this fund does have selective, what we call intelligent leverage associated with it. So we can leverage up to 1.5 times on the portfolio, which, in a volatile market, it creates exciting dynamic, exposure, but it also is something that when you're long the market, there's incredible torque to the portfolio in terms of how we can drive growth. So we're really excited about it. It's a high conviction play. Anyone who's tracking the markets today, December 2nd, knows it's been a pretty brutal couple of days in the cannabis markets, but Poseidon is a conviction investor around cannabis as a sector. And that's the great thing about ETFs, is ostensibly they provide you nice exposure to a sector, especially when you have focused and experienced managers like the team we have here at Poseidon. And so that's what we're doing here. And, when other people, it's like Warren Buffett says, be greedy when others are fearful. And I think that's been a mantra we've upheld at Poseidon. So I think that's how we're approaching the markets today when many people are being fearful.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Emily, and giving us the update.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always nice to see you both, and look forward to joining again soon.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back again tomorrow, so be sure to stay tuned by hitting that notification bell and smashing subscribe.